Thanks for staying with us. Now, the commission tasked to investigate the violence that characterized the Ayawaso West Wuogon by-election says the establishment of a SWAT unit at the National Security Council Secretariat is unconstitutional. In its report, a copy of which is exclusively available to Joy News, the commission led by Justice Emil Short found that the unit was instituted between 2010 and 2012, despite the fact that Ghana's constitution frowns on it. We will delve more into that, but first here are excerpts of that report, extracts of that report in this News Desk report.
The Commission recommends that the structure of reporting within the national security setup needs to be revised. In the current scheme of things, the technical person who also occupies the statutory security position, being the National Security Coordinator, is consigned to a fourth-level position in the reporting strata. It is recommended that he is elevated. The Commission recommends that the police should review their recruitment procedures and install merits-based criteria to ensure that the most qualified and not the most well-connected persons are enlisted. The Commission also urged the Electoral Commission to explore the possibility of resorting to electronic voting or some other method which does not depend on physical ballot boxes. Also, the Commission recommended the criminal prosecution of Mr. Ernest Akomia, alias Double, for the unauthorized possession of firearms. The Commission also recommended the criminal prosecution for the offence of assault, to wit, the slapping of Mr. Samuel George by Mohammed Suleimana. DSP Samuel Kojo Azugu's immediate removal from command responsibility at the Ministry of National Security, given his failure to appropriately command and control the SWAT team, was also recommended. For the Minister in charge of National Security, Mr. Brian Champong, the Emil Short Commission recommended that he is reprimanded for his ultimate responsibility as Minister in authorizing an operation of that character, and on a day of an election, the Executive Secretary of the Emil Short Commission, Ernest Kofi Abuchi, is satisfied with work done. On the other hand, the MP for Ningu Prampram, Sam George, is skeptical about the full implementation of the recommendations of the Emil Short Commission.
Multiple gunshots heard at the scene of an otherwise peaceful election. An MP was assaulted in the process. Masked gun-wielding men, believed to be part of the National Security Secretariat's SWAT team, were accused of brutalizing innocent civilians. Government set up a commission to probe the matter, but contradictions and varied accounts would emerge.
Later, they also said they heard gunshots coming from within the compound of the house. Our boys then gave some 6 warning shots.
There were many, my lord.
Many?
If I'm not mistaken, they were holding them. If I'm not mistaken, it will be over 20 per what I saw.
Okay. And were you able to find out the source of these empty shells? Who had, fired these gunshots? The empty shells that you saw, were you able to detect?
I inquired, but the information they gave me was that they were fired by the task force team that came there.
I saw them point directly into the crowd, in the direction of the crowd, and fire.
So they fired the warning shot. This made them to retreat and started to run helter-skelter.
For the angle, I don't know for warning shot, but mostly once it's targeted at this one, for warning shot I know mostly it should be up. So once it's targeted at an object below the height of maybe a normal human being, then I don't see it as a warning shot.
And therefore you conclude that they were potentially aimed?
They were
not aimed at a tree, but aimed.
I may say so.
The Commission concluded its work and submitted its report to the President on March 14. Article 283 of Ghana's Constitution requires the President to cause a publication of the Commission's report together with a white paper within 6 months. If the President decides not to do so, he must give reasons. For now, the scars of the violence still remain.
Somebody is over there now enjoying. He just shoot me. He wanted to shoot my life.
So what you watched there was a recap of the incidents leading to the establishment of the Ayawaso West Wuogon Commission of Inquiry headed by Justice Emil Short. They presented their report earlier this year to the President. Just this month, the President directed for the report to be published, a copy which we have now. But we have on the line Dr. Kwesi Enin. He's a renowned security analyst. He joins us on the line for his thoughts on the emerging details of the white paper, especially. Good morning to you, Dr. Enin.
Yes, good morning.
And how do you do? It's been a while.
Oh, well, my enemies have tried to destroy me, but God is good.
All right.
In the genuine sense.
It shall be well. Dr. Enin, so I'm sure you've heard the details of some of the details of the report. And one of the recommendations is that the SWAT unit be disassembled, if you like. What do you make of that?
No, it should not be disassembled. It must be disbanded.
Disbanded.
As a matter of national security agency.
Thank you very much for the correction.
Because that unit is a threat to the stability of this country, and their actions a danger also to this country. I mean, when I appeared before the commission, I think my submission was very clear. You cannot have a force whose recruitment, equipping, financing, operational discharge, and performance are not subject to parliamentary oversight. That unit's performance and behavior becomes an existential threat to this country. So, yes, I mean, their recommendations are good. Probably they could have been a little bit stronger. But disbanding the SWAT team and then retraining them prior to integration into the larger security apparatus becomes an imperative.
Another recommendation made by the Commission is that the President should review and restructure the Ministry of National Security establishment with a view to ensuring clarity of responsibilities and roles as well as lines of reporting. This is long overdue, don't you think?
No, I mean, I think that's a very fair thing, a very fair recommendation, because certainly the junior minister cannot and should not have had the authority to mobilize and deploy troops in a manner that the substantive minister who appears and responds to Parliament did not know. And I think that creates a disturbing picture of a not so clear lines of authority, of hierarchy, of command and control, and who ultimately takes the political responsibility for deploying those men.
Indeed, the report also indicates that the Minister of State appointed to the presidency at the Ministry of National Security, and I believe that should be Brian Achampong, should have a clearly delineated role with responsibilities indexed to that substantive sector minister. And this should establish a clear chain of command, which is what you just said right now. But in the report also, they are indicting Mr. Achampong as well and calling for his prosecution. Is this in the right direction, you think?
No, I think it's important that individuals must be held responsible and accountable for their acts of commission or omission, particularly when they are occupying sensitive positions in which actions that do not follow laid down standard operating procedures can contribute first to harming lives and property, but even more disturbingly, undermining the sanctity of established procedures. You know, the security field is what drives the economy, people's trust in government, the belief that systems are working. So those who handle that position are in a very sensitive place. And the report's recommendations, if I understand it correctly, is basically saying, look, let's try to put in place the systems if they don't exist. If they do, let's try and follow them so that in the performance of their legitimate duties, people can be held accountable. Because, you see, in a parliamentary democracy, the oversight roles that the Finance Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, that the Defense and Interior Committee plays in ensuring that we get optimal performance that is transparent and respects human rights and the rule of law by the security agencies is very important. But when you establish a SWAT team that even the Inspector General of Police and other ministers were unaware of, and how they are deployed, didn't follow established rules of procedure, then that threatens the democracy that we all so cherish.
Right.
And the performance and actions of that group becomes a potential threat to the state.
Right, Doc. Let me find out your thoughts on this particular one. It's quite controversial. The bit where the commission recommended that no masked or hooded men be used in electoral policing. The government white paper rejects that recommendation. What are your thoughts on that?
No masked or hooded individuals must be used in any operation in this country. That does not have to do particularly with a specific response to a terrorist threat or attacks on a specific building or buildings in which we are aware that those who occupy those buildings have either external networks whose knowledge of the faces of the operatives attacking that building may be detrimental to the operation. The use of hooded operatives in fairly routine exercises as an election must under no circumstances be part of the operations in this country.
The government is saying that it considers that recommendation to be sweeping and general and has a tendency to undermine national security operations in appropriate...
That's why I'm being very specific. That when it deals with a response to a potential terrorist threat or an attack against a particular infrastructure in which we think that there are terrorists or potentially violent extremist groups occupying that property, then the operatives who undertake that operation can be hooded because of the network nature of these terrorist groups and extremist groups, because they may send pictures of those operatives outside and they may be then attacked later. But in purely domestic cases in which it's an election, some civil disobedience, or an ordinary demonstration by workers, those operatives must under no circumstances be hooded. So whilst the recommendation may be sweeping and did not disaggregate the specific types of operations, I think in going forward we can say under what conditions can these operatives be hooded and who takes responsibility were they to be excesses in the performance of their duty.
Right. Moving on to another section of the report, it recommends that, the gentleman who supposedly assaulted the Member of Parliament for Ningo Pampram, Samuel George, should be prosecuted. The government has rejected this recommendation. What do you think is the implication of this?
Well, I think people go around slapping parliamentarians around. And certainly as we head towards 2020, we will see more parliamentarians or parliamentary candidates then being attacked. But I mean, these are recommendations. I mean, I think government can also reconsider what is in the white paper. But certainly, the immunity clauses are such that we must respect the sanctity of a parliamentarian, even irrespective of that individual or group of individuals' behavior. We cannot go slapping around our own members of parliament.
All right. Doc, I'm so grateful for your time. I'm sure we'll come back to you again for more analysis in due time, but I'm very grateful for your time. Dr. Kwesi Enning is a very renowned security analyst with the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Center. Thank you very much once again for your time. But I'm joining the studio now by my colleague and my joint line editor, head of our investigative desk, Malik Daba. Malik, always good to see you. But yes. So the report has been published, the white paper has been released. Interesting details emerging from there. Let's start from the structures, what the commission suggested or recommended, and how government is responding to that.
So you're absolutely right. You went through some of the structure, adjustments that the commission suggested in its report, which was issued, which was gazetted according to Information Minister Kojo Nkrumah this week, and which we were privileged to get a copy from sources we are not naming. But you went through some of the recommendations, which some of which were rejected, some of which were accepted with Dr. Kwesi Enning. I think the core ones are those relating to the use of the masked men. The commission states on page 57 of its report about the commission recommending that no mask or hooded men should be used for civilian policing, especially in electoral policing or the execution of intelligence contingent on or connected with any ongoing elections in Ghana. Now, when the commission responded, the white paper responded to that and says, well, it thinks that this recommendation itself was founded on a sweeping generalization, and that these men are not used for electoral purposes. That, in fact, on this particular day, at the Labaoleshi polling station, these men were not there as part of the election security for the day. And therefore, there was no basis for the commission to make this recommendation that it has made. And of course, you made reference to the recommendations about what will happen to even police recruiting. Again, the commission pointed out that the recruitment of police should be done in a manner which is not political and which will not influence the caliber of persons that get into the police service. The government responds in its white paper saying that, look, if you look at the Security and Intelligence Act, if you look at the Constitution and all of these police officers are not recruited on the basis of any partisanship, and that there is no basis at all for the commission to be talking about recruitment, and that these teams are not politically aligned, that when they are being recruited, their party colors are not considered when recruitments are being made into the police service. So basically, those are some of the recommendations. I think the key other ones, starting with the one you raised about NS Suleimana Muhammad. So Muhammad Suleimana is a guy who slapped Sam George. And when he appeared before the commission, he did tell the commission members that had he known that Sam George was a member of parliament, he would not have slapped him. He pointed out that he did not know that Sam George was a member of parliament and that Sam George insulted him and his ethnic group. It was at that point that he slapped him. Now, when the government issued its white paper, it says that it will not accept, in fact, it rejects a recommendation by the commission that Muhammad Suleimana should be prosecuted for that assault. And the basis of government's rejection is that the commission itself accepts the narrative by the gentleman that he was insulted, and that on the basis of that, the gentleman assaulted the MP because the MP provoked him, and that there was a defense of provocation available to this gentleman, Muhammad Suleimana, and therefore any attempt to prosecute him will not yield any results. Of course, there are those who argue that if you look at the Criminal and Other Offences Act 29, the defense of provocation is only available when the person using it is claiming extreme provocation, not just provocation, but extreme provocation. That's what Section 55 of Act 29 is saying. It's only in the case of extreme provocation that you can say, well, I acted uncontrollably when I slapped this person, but not just provocation. And this is what some lawyers argue, that they do not agree.
What would you define as extreme provocation?
Well, so there are parameters that the law gives. For example, the examples that are cited, if you find somebody sleeping with your wife there and then, that's extreme provocation. If you hit the person and you kill the person and you go to court, the defense of provocation is available to you.
Very well.
So those are examples of extreme provocation. And some lawyers argue.
Is this allegation that he insulted his tribe members, is that tantamount to extreme provocation?
That will be difficult to prove, but of course it will be left to an impartial judge to make a determination whether that constitutes extreme provocation as required by the law, on the basis of which somebody can use it as a defense. One of the other recommendations that was made related to Double, the guy we all heard at the Double is at Ernest Akumia. The commission recommended that he should be prosecuted because he was found to be holding guns or rifles that he was not entitled to hold for illegal possession or unlawful possession of these rifles. For the benefit
of those who know, would not know, can you just take us back to how he was able to acquire those firearms? I do believe that it was from one of the drivers.
Yes, he took it from one of the people who were part of all of this milieu there. And the commission says, no, this guy has no right to possess this weapon. He should be prosecuted. In respect of that recommendation, the government white paper says that has been referred to the Criminal Investigations Department of the Ghana Police Service for further investigation and for action thereof. So basically, these are some of the key recommendations, key responses by government to the recommendations, the 61-page recommendations of the Justice Short Commission report, which we got yesterday and which we have been serializing.
But it should come as a surprise to you and to many governance persons and those following this matter keenly. The government finds that the findings of the report fail to address the first and most critical of the terms of reference of the Commission, which is that they should make, quote, a full, faithful, impartial inquiry into the circumstances of and establish the facts leading to the events and associated violence that marred the Ayawaso West walk-on by-election. So in it is stating, the government's position is this, that the failure to do so, the failure by the Commission to do so, disables government from accepting in whole the findings of the Commission. Is this to suggest, Malik, that the Commission didn't do a good job?
It's a difficult one because, and this morning we read that part of the government's white paper, using that as a basis why it cannot wholly accept some of the recommendations. But when you read the report, if you go to page 11 of the report, under the banner, under the headline, Facts of the Events of 31st January, the report deals clearly with the actions of all the people, because the report itself said it had 33 witnesses over a month period. It listened to all of that, took the testimonies. All of those facts have been laid clearly in this report. So the report says that on the 31st January 2019, the Electoral Commission conducted a by-election in Ayawaso West Wogon constituency following the death of the Member of Parliament for the said constituency, Mr. Emmanuel Chirimate Jaku. Whilst the election proceeded normally in the generality of the polling stations comprising the constituency, the conduct of the elections in the Labaoleshi Presbyterian Basic School Cluster of schools polling station, hereafter called Labaoleshi School Polling Station, was nearly marred by serious violence involving the use of firearms which occurred around the residence of the parliamentary candidate of the National Democratic Congress. Now it goes on to give you a summary of the findings and recommendations of the commission. And all of these findings details what happened, who played what role, what they did on the day, the deployment of this 60-member SWAT team from national security, the role that they played, the basis upon which they went there. All of that is clearly spelled out in the report. So it's really difficult to understand what expectations government had when it says that, look, the first of the terms of reference was not satisfied, and that the circumstances of what transpired were not. Because if you read the report, everything is being stated.
Exactly.
Why the things that happened,
right.
how they happened. All of that has been built on the basis of the testimonies that were given by the witnesses that appeared before the commission. So maybe government will explain later on what it means by the statement that is made, which form the basis upon which it says it cannot wholly accept all of the recommendations. But of course, in our history, we know that the government white paper don't usually accept all the recommendations of commissions of inquiry anyway. It's never happened. I mean, usually they will accept some and reject some.
This is quite interesting. It begs the question, as you said, what expectations they had of the commissions. Absolutely. But thank you very much. Malik Dabas is my colleague here at Joy News and head of our investigative desk.
For it.
Malik, thank you very much. Let's stay on this a while longer because Raymond Akwa has been speaking to private legal practitioner John Indebugre on this matter. He's demanding the removal and prosecution of Minister of State in charge of national security, Brian Achampong, insisting the recommendation that the Milshort Commission for his reprimand is not punitive enough.
I don't know whether he cannot even be prosecuted. Because, I mean, if he is the one who authorized this unlawful operation, he ought to answer more seriously than just even being reprimanded or being removed. You see, we must set examples, very stringent examples to public office holders, so that they will know that when you are holding these offices, they are very temporary. But people take them and behave as if they are going to be there forever. And they do things that lead to a lot of harm to other citizens.
You're still watching Joy News Desk with me, Arbo Kumsin. We're taking a breather, but there's more after this.